So last question will be from Mr. Blake. Uh, so with Warner Brothers, Joaquin Phoenix, and director Todd Phillips standing up to the woke scolds and SJW media over Joker, even to the point of Phillips lambasting them for destroying comedy, is there hope for more people of influence in Hollywood waking up to the true nature of these people? Could this enemy mine scenario potentially lead to a truce of sorts with us and an end to the new blacklist? Also of note on the subject, Ellen DeGeneres standing firm in her friendship with George W. Bush. Yeah, the Ellen thing with Bush is another stake in the ground on people having had enough of this progressivism, having had enough of it. The Star Wars community has gone from heartbreak to rage to bitterness, and now people are actually starting to talk about lining up in tickets to see the opening night of Star Wars so that they can boo the movie. It's falling down all over the place. They've given it their best shot and they didn't succeed. Their philosophy is too. It's not even just too oppressive. It's just too absurd. And since their only way to show social status, which everybody needs, is through victimization, they continue to escalate victimization to the point where it's simply absolutely ridiculous, and people have had enough of it. I don't think Hollywood's going to change, and that's fine with me, because Hollywood is done. Everything that comes over that hill now is useless. Everything that comes from newspapers is useless. Network TV shows and stuff like that it's all useless. Even stuff that's cutting edge stuff like Netflix is still, you can kind of just detect a kind of a whiff of it starting to go around the corner. The future belongs to individual content creators. The future belongs to people making small movies and distributing them either through YouTube or whatever. And the reason I say that is because I look at a lot of content, and I find myself just naturally realizing that the people who are doing work on the internet, individuals like me, that are working on the internet, are producing far more interesting stuff than anything that's coming out of Hollywood. Far more interesting. I've heard people, just in the case of Star Wars alone, I've heard more excellent storylines for Star Wars that didn't happen from Star Wars fans than I ever saw coming out of J.J. Abrams. I think J.J. Abrams, apparently earlier today, he said, I just delivered the final cut of the thing, and I don't know, maybe I'm not very good at this job or something. He sounds like a guy who's been beaten up, but he deserves it. He's taken an enormous credibility hit, and he was at the wheel when Star Wars was destroyed. I don't think Jar Jar Abrams destroyed Star Wars. I think that he was the guy driving the bus, the person who if you had to put the single person on it, it'd be Kathleen Kennedy for sure, no question. But she didn't operate in a vacuum. She couldn't have gotten away with all this SJW stuff that destroyed the Star Wars franchise if people in the studios didn't agree with her on some level. And once it became clear just how badly they had destroyed this thing, then they started to try and walk it back. But walking it back actually makes it even worse. And the fact that Star Wars is destroyed as a pop culture phenomenon, and certainly as a cash cow, is disappointing for people like Kathleen Kennedy, but it's not the end of the world. In fact, it's mission accomplished. The one thing you have to understand about this, every time you think about people saying, well, these guys are so left-wing, but at least they respect the bottom line. It's not true. They don't. Take Kathleen Kennedy as an example. I don't know how much money she's worth, but vacuum tube Siri will tell me in just a minute. But Kathleen Kennedy, as an example, has more money than she will ever be able to spend. She's got more money than she could ever spend, and so money is not important to her. What's important to her is looking good at cocktail parties. That's what's important to her. And the way you look at cocktail parties out here is to stand up on the table and thump your chest about how much virtue you have. And so Kathleen Kennedy, surrounded by feminists and soy boys and all the rest of these genetic mutants that live out here, don't care about the money. They're all richer than hell. It doesn't matter to them. What matters to them is that they can go and brag to the people who they hang out with, because they never come in contact with the little people. 150 million? Yeah, okay, so that's enough money to keep you going. So yeah, like Rubber City Rebel says, the force is female. You want to wear a T-shirt that says the force is female, you're going to talk about force. You are going to force your views on people, and if it means you end up destroying the most valuable franchise in the world of entertainment, what difference does it make to her? It doesn't. She has done what she set out to do. And I'm not going to go into all the details because I talk about this way too much, but just to summarize, and I didn't know this entire picture until I really saw what the Rise of Soy Walker was going to be. But this is the final piece of the puzzle. By the way, I plan to be there on opening night or opening weekend because I want to go and see the reaction of crowds. I'll buy a ticket for some other movie and sneak it. So here's the thing. Looking back on it, I realized that they had to do two things. They had to destroy the existing mythology, which is the mythology of, look, I don't like talking in these terms. It makes me kind of ill. But this is how they do business, and so this is how we have to address this. The mythology of a young, white, straight male who goes from nothing, complete obscurity, to basically master of the universe through a long process of hard work and courage and individualism. Physical courage, not, the courage to stand up and announce that you're gay in 2019, which, would have been a statement in 1949. Real courage. So all the rest of it has got to go. That is the dominant mythology of our culture. Luke Skywalker's story was the single great mythological story of the last 20 years. Prior to that, it was Star Trek. But the first three movies they're virtually textbook hero's journey, almost perfect. And they're well made. The trilogy is great. And all you have to do is look at Luke Skywalker to understand how well those first three movies are made. He starts out as a nothing. He has then the darkness of the soul in the second act, and then in the third act he becomes transcendental and wins the ultimate battle. But it turns out he didn't really win, because even though he blew up the Death Star and threw Emperor Palpatine down into the endless pit before the thing exploded in a thermonuclear reaction, turns out that Palpatine survived that. And that's worse. So it's worse than anyway. They should have just brought in Ronald McDonald for a villain rather than bring back Palpatine. But J.J. Abrams doesn't have an original thought, and never has, apparently. But my point is this. So you had to destroy that mythology. And the thing that I didn't realize until I really started thinking about the trailer for Rise of Soy Walker is that once Luke was destroyed, and he was destroyed in The Last Jedi, I thought that was the end of the line, but it wasn't. The end of the line is you've hollowed out that area where Luke Skywalker used to be, and now they're going to put Rey into that hole, and they're going to fill that cavity with this toxic mercury of Rey, and they're going to tell you that the last line in the movie, somebody comes up to Rey and says, "What's your name?" She says, "My name is Rey. Rey Skywalker." Okay, so she's Rey Skywalker. So she's the Rise of Skywalker. So she is Skywalker now. So not only did they destroy Luke, which I thought was the end game, but they're more evil than that. They destroyed Luke, and they inserted this female into Luke's place. And by her taking his name at the end of this catastrophe, she is basically saying that they're all saying, we have rewritten the history. The Force is female. The Skywalker story that you're familiar with, it's all about Rey. Who's this Luke guy you're talking about? It's always been Rey. It's always been Rey. And Oceania's always been at war with East Asia too. It's always been Rey. They have basically taken him out, replaced him with this entire new universe of theirs, with all of their values, and then they're going to try and pat down the ground and just go on and assume that this is the Skywalker story now. This is the Star Wars story. It's the story of Rey. The only problem is that they're so insecure. I used to think it was just laziness, but seriously, people like Kathleen Kennedy are, this is the only word for it, they're so unbelievably insecure that they cannot do what is necessary to create an interesting character. They're so blinded by their ideology and they're so insecure about it that they could have taken, that would have been a complete photocopy of the first three, but it would have at least been watchable. You know, Rey could have been somebody who failed, somebody who had to work hard, get back up again, fail again, and so on. You would have gotten invested in it, you would have cared. But no, she's got all the power immediately from the beginning because she's a strong woman role model. And by the way, if you think that that's a good role model for kids, if you think that Rey is a good role model for young women, you're out of your mind, because Rey is magic. Rey has everything immediately because she's strong, independent woman. But magic like that doesn't exist. If you want to have a role model for women, and you want to have a female character be a role model, then that person has to start out small, and then they have to fail and fail and fail, so that when they have shown the end of this story arc, you realize that hard work and perseverance pays off. That's a role model. And they can't do it. They're so insecure that she has to win everything all the time. This is the whole Mary Sue character idea. The whole idea of a character who never loses, who is born into incredible powers, no explanation for how she got them, and no real concern about it either. She's never picked up a lightsaber, but in the first movie she defeats the ultimate villain. She defeats the top boss with a lightsaber, having never picked one up before. She defeats the guy who's trained under Luke Skywalker for years. And so I'm sure that made Kathleen Kennedy feel good, but in terms of drama, so you beat the boss already, and you don't have anything to learn, and nobody can stop you. Luke Skywalker has to work for months so that he can try and raise a pebble off the ground, and Rey, who doesn't work at all, just opens the door, looks outside, and giant boulders fly into the air because she's so awesome, because she's a woman. You see, because she's a woman, that's why she's so much stronger. Okay, nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about this character. Nobody likes the character. Daisy Ripley seems nice enough, but she's probably not. But nobody cares. They can't do it. They cannot do it. And the reason they can't do it, and this is the point I was trying to make, is that a Mary Sue character is ultimately the power fantasy of the person writing the story. It's not somebody trying to craft a story. It's somebody trying to craft their own ego and put their own and have their own personal weaknesses healed. In other words, the people that write and produce and direct these kind of things are so determined to prove this point that that they can't do what's necessary in order to prove the point. It's like, pick somebody, trying to think of an example of somebody who, let's just take a guy who's like really short. A person with sufficient charisma, it's not a problem. But there are a number of people, and this just, I don't mean to single them out, I just had to think of something. But they get to the point where they're so touchy about it, and they think that everything is about that. Everything's about their height, and they're so touchy about it that they cannot even bear to look at it. So they become the tallest person in the world, and they just drop basketballs into the hoop, and that's their power fantasy. Their it's their ego boost. And so you realize that Star Wars has been ruined intentionally by 6-year-old girls, and it's not lost on people either. Feminists are not capable of writing a good movie. They don't have the skill. They don't have the skill, and they especially have too many insecurities. It's almost like these latest feminists are doing everything they can to prove the entire theory of feminism wrong. Now, Wonder Woman is not a Mary Sue, and Wonder Woman I didn't see the original, but looks to be a good movie, and this next one coming up, I've heard good things about it, because the reason people like her, that character, is because she suffers. She feels pain. She has attachments to people. She's got weaknesses. She has setbacks and reversals. So they're going to reap the reward for having done the work. But aside from the whole political agenda, I just would like to say finally that if you look at the last movie, and if you look at the last two, if you look at The Force Awakens and Return of the Jedi, and I'm sure that the Rise of Skywalker will be even more of this. If you just look at the writing, take all the politics out of it, and assume that there was never an original trilogy of any kind. It's just plain lazy. It's just, and that's the ultimate word for it. It's the only real word that really describes what's going on with J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson and all the rest of them. They're just lazy. They're not good at their job. J.J. Abrams is an okay director in terms of his ability to put together action sequences. He's a terrible storyteller, awful, and it's just lazy. This business of Admiral whatever her name is, the Star Trek character who's married to Lily Tomlin. This business about going into hyperspace and going right through ships destroys the entire sense of the universe. All the rules of the universe are destroyed just in that one case, and there are many cases like this. But the whole point of it is it's just plain lazy writing. They couldn't think of anything else to do, so they did that. And I see it all the time. It's the same kind of lazy writing that portrays fighter pilots as like these swaggering guys, it's like permission denied. Oh, well, we're going to do it anyway. This guy, Maverick, you... It's lazy. It's lazy. They don't know enough about what the reality is, and so they take the cheap, easy way out. And the ultimate thing about this is, look, this is a well-known trope here, but if you're going to have a fictional universe, and you want me to believe in things like galaxies far, far away and lightsabers and Jedis and all the rest of it, you have to set up rules in that universe, and then you have to abide by those rules. You can't just break the rules because you're too stupid to think of a way to get around by following the rules. You can't just keep breaking the rules. If you're going to set up a fictional world, you can pretty much make up whatever rules you want to, but once you've made up those rules, you can't violate them. You can't have Gandalf just suddenly start to fly. Just levitate in the air. You can't do it. So you break the rules of this, and they just break it out of just sheer laziness. They're just bad writers. And I've seen not only Red Letter Media, but a bunch of other people too, have basically said, have gone through, there's a guy who I just discovered, I've been talking about some of these YouTube channels. Hang on. He's really, really smart guy. And this is why I said that there's nothing interests me coming out of Hollywood. All the stuff that's interesting to me is is content created on the web. Give me 1 second, please, por favor. Where did it go? This guy, who I'm about to find, is really, really deep. I just listened to a 30-minute thing he did on the difference between Eastern and Western styles of storytelling, and the guy's fantastic. Let me just figure out what his name is. There he is. Is that him?
Let me give you some advice.
Hang on. I want to say it's Literature Devil, but I kind of think that there was somebody else beyond. No, maybe it's him. Anyway, wow, you know, this guy took a look at the first movie and basically said, here's how you could have made this work. Just to give you an example, this is not me, this is Literature Devil speaking here. But he said, look, so you've got Luke Skywalker, who's a farmhand, and you know he's a farmhand because he works on a farm, and you see him working on a farm, and he's taken care of and takes care of his aunt and uncle, and that's how he survives. And we learn from the aunt and uncle that he's got some skills as a pilot, but obviously Uncle Owen has taught Luke how to survive. And then you go to Rey, who has no mentor, no parents, no nothing, because that would mean dependent on somebody, and strong women can't depend on anybody. And so Rey has no connection, no background, no backstory, nothing. And what this guy was saying is, you could have done something like, in a very, very short period of time, you could have done something like Rey was either stolen or lost from her parents or sold into slavery or whatever the case may be, and she was adopted by an elderly Jedi woman who basically raised her from infancy, taught her the basics of some things, just enough so that you could buy that she's got some awareness of it. And then she goes off to fight some battle, and she never comes back. And Rey spends the rest of her time waiting for this mother figure of hers to come back, like she said she would. Now you got a character. You've actually got you kind of got Newt in Aliens. You kind of got that story. I'm waiting for my strong mother figure to come back and save me. And any number of things you could do would work, but no. So I was thinking about this the other day. It's like, all right, so since the whole thing's just a giant ripoff, we know that Rey is Luke. We know that Poe Dameron is the dashing pilot, so he's Han. And that means that Finn is Princess Leia. And that's about right. By the way, another thing that this guy pointed out was that with Finn, you've got a guy who trained as an Imperial Stormtrooper. His name, Finn, comes from FN something, right? He had a number. He's trained. He didn't have the stomach for it, but he was trained. He's wearing the white outfit. He was trained as a warrior. And Rey knocks him on his butt immediately, like he's an actor. You know? It's just a horrible mess. And this is why I'm so confident. I deeply regret that Star Wars has been destroyed. I think there's going to be a revolution, a content revolution. I think fans now are angry enough to realize that even though these companies launched these things, and even though Star Wars belongs to George Lucas, it also belongs to a lot of other people too. And I think we're at the point now where fans are just going to say, you know what, just because it's made by Lucasfilm doesn't mean anything. It's already shown me that they don't care. So we'll make our own canon. Canon will be what we decide is canon. It's not going to be something that's got the stamp of Lucasfilm or anybody else on it. From now on, it's going to be what is true to the original source material, which is why Prelude to Axanar is canon, and in my opinion, and Discovery is not Star Trek. It's some kind of a science fiction show, but it's not Star Trek. And putting the name on it just doesn't make it Star Trek. Even this is the big lesson that everybody's learned in the last several years with this whole rodeo with Ghostbusters and all the rest of it. Even though companies and left-wingers own the title, own the franchise, if they're going to abandon what made the franchise, then the fans are just going to say, all right, not only are we not going to watch this movie, we're going to make our own, and that's going to be canon because we need this. And I think just two more things. Ryan Johnson famously said all throughout The Last Jedi, which is the film that really destroyed Star Wars. He said that we're going to subvert your expectations. We're here to challenge you and subvert your expectations. So let's just think about that for a second. You go to a Star Wars movie because you love Star Wars. And because you love Star Wars, you have expectations. And you expect those expectations to be realized because that's why you're a fan. For him to say we're going to subvert your expectations by giving you something that is the opposite of what you thought you were getting, I mean, what's that like in the world of business? It's I go down to buy a car, and I spend 9 hours haggling with the guy, and finally we come to an agreement. I sign a check, and then the guy brings out a tricycle, and I say, "What the hell is this?" And he says, "We've decided to challenge your expectations of what you thought you were getting in an automobile." Fans are not fans. Fans are your customers. They're your customers. You need to make them happy. It doesn't mean you give them everything that they want all the time. You can do things like, no one would voluntarily watch the character they love get into trouble. That's your job as a writer. Get them into trouble, get them out again as a better person. But nobody goes to a fancy restaurant and pays $300 to get a Big Mac. That would be subverting their expectations. It's true, but it would also be the end of their business. This is your customer. This is why they're fans. They're fans because this is why Star Wars is Star Wars and not Ice Pirates, because this resonated with people deeply, and you don't respect that. You just seem to think that you can use that as a weapon to get people to think the way you want to. You can sum up all of this outrage and catastrophe and the fact that they're done, that these progressives are finished. You can sum it up really in a sentence or two. Star Wars supposedly takes place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. There are no current events on Earth in 21st century America that have anything to do at all with what happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And to make that bludgeon people into what they should be thinking about on Earth in 21st century America is why it is complete catastrophe. You can't do it. And ultimately, and this will be the final close of the closing, the reason that I think progressivism is finished is because I think people have finally come to the realization after decades of this stuff that these people have nothing to offer except that they will make sure that you never have fun again. That's the progressive promise to America. You will never have fun again. And that's what we're selling. So be sure to get out there and vote for us, because we're not going to let you enjoy anything. If you're enjoying something, something's wrong. You can't. The only way you can make people follow an ideology that worthless and that disgusting and that unpleasant is with guns and the willingness to murder large numbers of people. And the progressives don't have guns, and they don't have the willingness to murder people. They just have the willingness to murder ideas. It's not the same thing. So anyway, Star Wars is still Star Wars, and people will make Star Wars movies. And I think after Rise of Skywalker, and given how quickly all of things like the things I talked about earlier and showed earlier are happening, it's just a matter of just months, if not a couple of years, before people are making their own Star Wars. And the proof of this is Star Trek Prelude to Axanar. Prelude to Axanar is absolutely terrific, and I think I think Axanar shows the future. I think Star Trek Continues shows the future. We need fans who are talented to make these things because they love them. And because they love them, they won't destroy them. They'll improve them. That whole Star Trek Continues should have been, it was the 4th season of Star Trek, the original series, as far as I'm concerned. So that's where the future is. I'm utterly convinced of it. And so because they use their politics to destroy these movies, now you have an entire generation that may not be conservatives, but they certainly hate the progressives in a big, big, big way. And they have accelerated their own inevitable demise. And the full impact of this will not be felt for another year or two. But when it does get felt, they're going to know it. All right, it's time for me to go home. 2-hour show. Hey, just a little bit under. I'd like to thank our members for making this show possible. Everything that comes out of here is provided for by a small number of people who are doing very, very big things, and we are grateful to them all the time. All of us are. And expect to see an awful lot more of this. We're going to be pushing this harder than somebody who owns a Yugo in San Francisco. And that'll do it for this edition of the Stratosphere Lounge. Thanks very much for joining us. I expect we will see you right here next week at this same bat time and same bat station. So everybody have a good evening, and we'll talk to you later. Okay? Right? Got it? Okay. Bye-bye.